that role of religion in somehow developing fabric of society, let's say. So it obviously makes sense that religion should play a positive role in developing social capital, but I think that depends very much, not so much maybe on doctrines of religion, but on historical traditions and how this or that church somehow factored in historical trends. So I think in Protestant world, in Britain, United States, it so happened historically that religious organizations were somehow considered to be forces for change, for involving people, for making institutions more inclusive, etc. I think in Voltairean tradition is also based on the assumption that in Catholic world for a long time it was considered other way around, that Catholic Church was the for preservation of ancient ancien regime, although after the 1960s, Second Vatican Council, it changed, and Catholic Church also started to play different roles. So in Islam, as I mentioned also, the historical trajectory is also different, and sometimes Islamic forces are considered forces for democracy, but not necessarily forces for liberalism and for civil rights, etc. So I think it is very different from one country to the other. In Georgia, I think that the church is traditionally not very socially active. It's not such a social actor. It doesn't go out. It somehow expects people to come to the church. So it is not active in the society, promoting some societal values. So it may change later, but so far one could say so. I think the Georgian church might have played another role, although not very consistently in the last years, somehow a center of gravity in an extremely polarized society, or a center of stabilization and coming together in a politically polarized society. That it became Georgian tradition somehow to have these camps who don't talk to each other but all go to the same church. So that role that the church may play and sometimes play, although also the both parties want to somehow attract to its own side and politicize it for its own benefit. So sometimes the church fails to play. So that's one of the directions to see what role the church plays in shaping society, not just political role.
მომხდარი ცდების შესახებ. როდესაც საშინაო პირები ჩაიგნენ მშვიდობიან ბრძოლებაში და შეგახსენებთ, რომ 7 მაისი არის სამაფობიასთან ბრძოლის საერთაშორისო დღე.
That's a really public march, I would say, of the LGBT community on 17th of May this year in Georgia, in Tbilisi, and it was basically attacked by some clerical figures and their adherents. And so the police did not really intervene into this as actively as it should have. I will give here kind of the possibility.
Question can be answered in two ways. I can answer it in two ways, as a citizen, let's say so, and as an analyst. As a citizen, my position is very clear that violence against anybody is totally unacceptable, and I have expressed that also in writing, and for people like me and many of my friends, there is no question about it. It's very obvious violence against the LGBT community or any other community who does not attack anybody is totally unacceptable. On the other hand, of course, if we look at analytically, I think for many churches accepting sexual minorities and gay community has been maybe more difficult than accepting other things. So it's not to be surprising that it's a sensitive issue that invites, let's say, so very emotional reactions. This is not in any way to justify any acts of violence, but it's something that, let's say, so if you look from an analytical perspective, has to be very surprising, let's say so. And inaction of the police, which is maybe more important issue than actual violence, because some people may have their, maybe hot heads, let's say so, or reactionaries or whatever. In every society, we have such people. The main thing is that state does not allow them to do that. So that's the greater problem, rather than there are some religious fanatics. I think that's also shows that ambivalence of the Georgian government and the Georgian ruling elite, which is somehow torn between the genuine, I think, wish to be Europe, but on that and build a liberal society, but also pragmatic considerations that supporting of LGBT community is certainly not popular thing, especially in the election year. And also, I mean, maybe the top of the party, top of the leadership thinking those categories, but I don't think that all policemen and all middle range leadership has internalized, let's say, so liberal values. So that takes time, but in general I would say that on the balance I am actually positive and optimistic if we look at the trend of the last 20 years. In the 90s, I don't remember anybody publicly saying I am homosexual. That was full taboo, and I don't remember these issues being discussed in the media. It was just, media was very free in terms of censorship from the state. You could say any nasty things about any politician, I mean, absolutely anything. But there was one case when one politician, very influential government politician, was there was a hint in some tabloid that he was a homosexual, and he shot himself that very morning because for him it was such a disgrace. So I think if we take that as a starting point and look at today's Georgia, where yes, this march was attacked violently and not properly, of course, protected by the police, but 2 days later there was march in protest against religious extremism, and that march was not attacked, and it was a very small group of people, but it was the first time when on Rustaveli Avenue, which is kind of a very important place for Georgia, the fate of country we saw there from time to time, and there we saw this multi-colored flag of the LGBT community waving. So I think that's quite an important change in Georgia.
You had mentioned before certain cases where religious people felt like they were being discriminated against, like Christians being unable to wear crosses in public office or having to register same-sex marriages against their beliefs. And I'm an American, we're having the same issue in America most recently over whether Catholic organizations need to provide contraception under the new healthcare law. And so I'm wondering, what do you think should be done in these cases where there seems to be a collision between religious freedom issues and public policies being set by a democratically elected government?
First of all, the question is whether what the courts call reasonable accommodation could be made for the expression of people's religious beliefs. I mean, it's my own conviction that reasonable accommodation could have been made for the relate councillor not to counsel people of the same sex but still be a member of that organised. Similarly, the Civil Registration Partnership. So I think that in many of these cases, reasonable accommodation ought to be made.